Moonlight played on the window glass. A girl was sleeping on the bed. The light of the moon played in her scattering of hair, gently illuminating her figure. The girl opened her eyes. She suddenly realized that the surrounding objects were familiar to her. She recognized her childhood room. It all made her wonder how she ended up here and what it meant. Rihanna turned her head and saw the mourning dress. She remembered wearing it to her mother's funeral. She was 12 years old then. She only wore it once in her life. That's why I was surprised to see this outfit. What did it all mean? That it was a dream? Because the situation was more like an illusion than reality. Rihanna looked at the door, and she thought that if she really returned to the past, then someone would knock. The girl heard a knock on the door. The voice asked if she was awake. It was Mary. She was worried about the girl. The nanny understood that the girl felt sadness in her soul from the loss of her mother. The woman tried to console the child. Without her support, Rihanna would feel worse. The maid gently wiped the tears from the girl's eyes. She tried to cheer up the child and was afraid that she would get sick. Our heroine realized that she had returned to the past. Her heart was filled with anxiety and amazement. Mary, like a devoted servant, took care of Rihanna. It has been this way since she was a child, never missing a day. Every morning the nanny was nearby. She helped the girl wake up and greet a new day. The little girl recalled with warmth how they looked after her as a child. Her heart was filled with joy from pleasant memories. She was happy to be with such a kind nanny. Rihanna remembered that Mary would later be kicked out for falsely accusing her of stealing jewelry. She will leave, shrouded in sadness. This will be a very unfair situation, and then the nanny will be left alone. And now the girl was very glad to meet Mary. She missed her very much. The maid tried to calm the girl down. She thought she had a bad dream. The nanny gently hugged and calmed the child. The woman tried to assure the girl of her support and her father's love. Mary asked her not to worry, and she said that everything would be fine. But the heroine understood that this would not happen. The father will bring his illegitimate child into the house, and that evil woman. Rihanna understood that they would take everything from her, including my father. So she was worried about it. The maid said that the count would come soon. That's why the couple got ready. But Mary did not know where he went after the funeral. She was sure that he would return home today. Mary wiped the child's face. Suddenly, the girl asked to find a lawyer. Mary was very surprised by this request. She asked again if we were talking about Mr. Ned. The maid could not understand why the girl needed him, but Rihanna began to rush the nanny. She said there was no time for explanations. The girl wanted to check something before her father returned. Mary replied that it was unlikely that she would be able to meet with a lawyer now. The girl asked the reason. She had a very surprised and pleading look. In the end, Mary replied in a friendly manner that everything would be done. She repeated this phrase again and asked to wait a little. The door to the room closed. The heroine closed her eyes and began to think. Yesterday was her mother's funeral. Soon her father, Count Allison, will bring his illegitimate child. She was worried that because of this all her misfortunes would begin again. And all because she returned to the past. Her gaze became sad. But perhaps this is a blessing from God. She didn't know how to understand this and whether there was a chance to change everything. The girl looked at the dress again. There were many questions and thoughts in her head. And then she decided for herself that enough suffering was enough. The Countess decided that she would never suffer again. So she decided, looking at her reflection in the mirror. She wanted the one she now sees in the reflection to live a different life. The weather was sunny outside. The carriage drove up to the house. The sound of horses' hooves could be heard. The Count told Letitia that he was glad that they would live together. The girl was also happy. She thought that now she would live like in a fairy tale, because he will live with his father. The long-haired, red-haired spoiled girl showed joy with all her appearance. Her father hugged her with all tenderness. He believed that if it were not for his wife, they would have lived together long ago and happily. The man would like to take his daughter and her mother much earlier. Letitia's mother always assured that the Count would not abandon them, that he will definitely take them to him. And the girl believed it. She hugged her father more and more every minute. Her father whispered to her that he loved her very much. He said that he had another daughter, but he only loved Letitia. The girl also loved her father very much. She had been waiting all her life to be able to live with him. The carriage drove closer and closer to the house. The girl looked out the window at her new home. It seemed that this was the happiest hour of her life. She was looking forward to this day so much. And now everything will be hers. Only her. She used to live in a house where toys had to be shared with others. How she didn't love it. The nanny often scolded her for this. And she explained that even if you really want it, you still can't take away someone else's property. Often these teachings caused dissatisfaction in the child. The father asked Lutetia to wait a little longer. He explained that his wife was seriously ill. Therefore, soon, after her death, he will be able to take the child to him. With deep hope, the girl waited for the time when her father could take her home. And in the word die, there was hope for her. If the Countess leaves this world, then the girl will finally be able to leave with her dad. Years passed in deep anticipation. Lutetia was waiting for this time to come sooner. She really wanted the Countess to die quickly. The child's eyes shone with joy as she imagined this time. And then one day her father told her the news that he was taking her to live with him. Finally they arrived at the house. They also went in together. The father held his beloved daughter tightly by the hand. The weather seemed to rejoice along with them. Servants were waiting for them near the house. They said words of greeting. This was her home now. This joyful moment has finally arrived. How happy they were. All the servants greeted the Count, even Geoffrey. True, he asked what kind of girl came with him, and Alessan proudly replied that it was his daughter. The red-haired beauty of the city stood in full view of everyone. Previously, she could not appear in this house, but now everything is different. Geoffrey at first did not understand what the Count was talking about. At that moment, the sound of footsteps was heard. It was Rihanna coming down. She looked at those around her with a cold gaze, especially the father and the red-haired girl. The father called the eldest daughter to come down and come over. He wanted to introduce her to his youngest daughter. In response, he heard an order to get out. The father was at a loss. And again the order was given to get out of the house. "Clean up with your daughter." The father looked at the girl with bewilderment. The red-haired girl didn't expect this either. Fear was visible in her eyes. A few hours earlier, a lawyer had been in the estate's living room. He came at the request of the younger countess. Rihanna was looking forward to it. The lawyer sat down at the table and treated himself to tea. The girl was always quiet. Therefore, the suddenness of the meeting with the lawyer surprised Ned. The heroine wanted to see her mother's marriage contract. She wanted to know about her inheritance. Ned nearly choked on his tea in surprise upon hearing this request. But the girl insisted that the lawyer now assure her right to inheritance. She wanted a new guardian appointed. The lawyer was surprised why the girl was in such a hurry. After all, the Count has not arrived yet. However, the young countess threatened that if he refused to comply with her request, she would accuse her father and the lawyer of tax evasion. Such assertiveness alarmed the lawyer. He couldn't understand how such a thing could have occurred to her. It seemed amazing to him that a 12-year-old girl could say such a thing. She said she understood the surprise of others if she accused her father. But she wanted to tell her godmother, the Queen, about this. And then the investigation would be carried out very carefully. The lawyer realized that it was better not to quarrel with the Queen. This could end badly for him. After all, everyone knows that tax evasion and treason against the royal family can land you in jail. Both Rihanna and the lawyer knew about this. So when her father came, she was very brave. She was not afraid to tell him this news to his face. The words addressed to the Count were a surprise to everyone. At first, he tried to scold the girl in front of everyone and yell at her. In response, the Countess took out the will. She said that they had completed all the necessary procedures with the lawyer. The servants were surprised. Now the only owner of the house was the young Countess. The heroine held the document in her hands. Rihanna Alanissan. It was she who received the estate from her mother by right. The red-haired girl became more and more afraid. It seemed that her dream had collapsed. What she has dreamed about for these many years will now not come true. There was sadness in the eyes. The Count could not understand what rights his daughter was talking about. He thought she was crazy. The young Countess called Geoffrey. He obediently obeyed and approached. Rihanna asked him to check this document and let the Count look at it. She held out her hand with the sheet for Geoffrey, and he took it. The document stated that if the marriage between Regan Allison and Anastasia Privius was dissolved, then all their property would be transferred to the state. The Count bowed his head upon hearing this. The only heirs can be the children of Anastasia Privius. Therefore, her own daughter Rihanna Allison receives the title and all the property. The document is recognized as valid by Allison's family lawyer. The Count gritted his teeth tightly in rage. Geoffrey was surprised, but at the same time glad that his young mistress now owned the estate. The Count went up the stairs to look at the document. The man was unusually surprised by what was taken away. In a fit of anger, the Count tore the document. He told Rihanna that her rights were not important to him. The Count believed that his eldest daughter could not use her own property independently until she came of age. He said that his daughter should obey him like her father, and he believed that it was the parents who decided to live or die for their children. But the girl replied that he had not fully read the contract. This marriage was between the people of Arundel and Crichton. In this case, the child can choose his own guardian, and she chose her uncle from Crichton as her guardian. This meant that her father could no longer give her orders. The Count's eyes were full of anger. These words also surprised the servants standing nearby, including Geoffrey and the girl's nanny, Mary. The Earl was very surprised how his daughter could give his property to the Crichtons, but the girl repeated again that he no longer had any rights here. She ordered the father to take his child and get out of the house. Letitia stood nearby. She understood that her dream was destroyed. The red-haired girl stood and looked at everyone with frightened eyes. At that moment, the Count swung his hand at Rihanna. She was ready for her father to hit her. But then Mary came up and shielded the girl. The father's blow fell on the nanny. The girl ran to her protector to help her come to her senses. Geoffrey reprimanded the Count for this action, but Allison said that if he didn't want to get it too, he shouldn't stand in his way. Geoffrey was fearless. The servant boldly declared that an honest person should stop violence and would not allow the Count to behave in such a way. Allison was angry. He was surprised how Geoffrey's servant dared to behave like that. Other servants observed this situation. The Count asked that Geoffrey be taken away from him, but the servant simply continued to stand and did not respond to the request. And then everyone heard the loud word, "Attention." It was the voice of the young countess. The servants looked at her. She ordered everyone, as the new mistress, to remove the Count and his child from the estate. The servants took her father's hands to lead him out of the house. But the red-haired girl turned to the heroine. She pitifully called her sister. Rihanna said she doesn't consider her a sister. She remembered her past childhood and how evil Letitia was. She always wanted to be in Rihanna's place, and all her life she disliked her older sister. At this moment, Letitia reminded her sister that they had the same father. She looked at her older sister with pitiful eyes. The red-haired girl asked not to kick them out. Rihanna looked at Letitia and her outfit. She said that the dress she came in was sewn for her by her mother when she was alive. This dress was very expensive for the young countess. Letizia said that her father gave her this dress. The countess replied that the girl would only receive this dress from her, but she can live with her father as they wanted. Rihanna once again asked her father and Letizia to vacate the house. When they left, the countess closed the door. The father and the girl were standing on the street. At this time, Mary and Rihanna were sitting in the living room. The girl was surprised why the nanny stood up for her. And why did she take the blow? It was stupid in the eyes of the heroine. But the nanny replied that the young countess was still small, that no child should be punished like this by their parents. If the Count had hit his daughter, she would probably have been in great pain. Reasoning this way, the nanny wanted to protect the child. She believed that anyone in her place would have done the same. It was obvious to her. Suddenly, the young countess invited her nanny to go with her to Crichton. She was surprised why the girl wanted to go there, but the Duchess repeated that they needed to leave as soon as possible. She asked the nanny if she would go with her. Mary was born in Arundel. She was an orphan but worked as a servant to Anastasia, who saw talent in her. Later, she began to serve Rihanna. The girl said that Mary could stay here too, and if she wanted to work elsewhere, the Countess was ready to write a letter of recommendation. But the nanny promised to always be with the girl. The child was very happy about this. Mary had no family, so she wanted to serve the girl. The woman suggested that she warn the queen before leaving for Crichton. Otherwise, she would have been upset that they didn't say goodbye to her. Rihanna agreed. The queen's name was Hertzia Cheska. During the civil war for the throne, she fought on the battlefield as an army commander. Hertzia stopped the rebellion of the aristocrats. This is a queen with incredible power. Rihanna once loved her son. In the past, Hertzia became a mother to Rihanna. The girl remembered how she met Hertzia's son. He and his mother went to the queen. When we met, everyone greeted each other warmly. At that time, they had not seen each other for a long time. But the queen understood that Anastasia's health was most important. They were glad to see each other. The queen invited guests to her summer garden. In the middle of the garden, there was a beautiful gazebo. The queen prepared special cookies for them. The girl loved him very much, so she was grateful to Hersia for the treat. The queen saw that the girl was growing up to be as beautiful as her mother. The women sat down in the gazebo, and the girl went for a walk in the garden. There were beautiful butterflies in the garden, but later the heroine saw an unusual golden bird sitting on a tree. The bird got entangled in the branches. The little countess wanted to help her but did not know how. Suddenly, the girl heard a request to leave the bird. Turning around, Rihanna saw a handsome boy. It was an unexpected meeting. The heroine decided to meet him. She asked the boy who he was, but in response she heard words of surprise. At that moment, the bird wanted to fly away. But because she was entangled in the foliage, she could not do this. Rihanna really wanted to help her. The boy drew the attention of his new acquaintance to the fact that a cat was climbing up a tree. The hero believed that there was no point in helping the bird, since its fate was decided. It would soon be eaten. The girl cried because of this. The boy tried to calm her down, otherwise everyone would have thought that he was the reason for her tears. So the hero realized that he needed to save the bird. He tried to climb a tree. At this time, the cat approached the bird. The boy grabbed the bird and a branch broke under the cat. All three of them fell to the ground. The girl ran up to her new friend. He rose from the ground and the cat ran away from them. The boy had a bird in his hands which he had saved. He let her go and she flew up. During the flight, the bird dropped one feather. It was bright golden in color and fell right on the girl's head. The feather attracted the heroine's attention. The boy was surprised why he risked his life, and the girl didn't even look at him after that. Rihanna showed him the feather. This bird was Artaxia. In Arendelle, she is called Artaxia, and in Crichton, she is called Master. They said that these birds were magical. They could live both in the human world and in heaven. These birds were no different from ordinary birds while they were in the human world. But in the sky, their wings become large and shining. Legend said that whoever caught Atraxia's feather would be granted one wish. The girl said that she saw the bird grow in size in the sky, begin to sparkle brightly and fly away. The hero was very surprised by this story, and believed that it was a real miracle. Rihanna was completely sure that this bird was Atraxia. The boy expressed surprise that Rihanna didn't ask if he was okay after the fall. The girl handed the hero a feather and offered to take it. She said that this feather could fulfill any of his wishes, and all because he saved the bird. The boy asked if the wish would really come true later. Rihanna said that Dima succeeded. You need to hold the pen in front of you and ask with all your heart for what you want. The hero decided to find out who Dima is. It was the heroine's cousin. The boy handed the feather back to Rihanna. Because of this, she thought that the boy did not like the feather, but he said that if it weren't for the heroine, he wouldn't even think about saving this bird. Therefore, he wants to give the feather to his new friend. She was very grateful for the gift. She asked the boy's name again. His name was Igor. He was the son of Hertia and the future king. When the boy was 12 years old, he became very ill. For a long time, doctors did not know how to help him. His temperature did not drop for 4 days. No medicine helped. But one day a doctor was found who could help Igor. He gave the boy medicine, and all that remained was to wait for the temperature to subside. The queen spent all the days of his illness next to him. She was very afraid that the boy would die. 2 days later, it was all gone. The temperature had subsided, and he was expected to make a full recovery soon, and all he needed was rest. The queen decided that after this she needed to marry her son as quickly as possible. But the boy was still young. Perhaps it was too early to think about marriage. Many were surprised by the queen's decision, especially the Marquise Rozan, who was her close servant. Hertia explained that Igor could die suddenly, which is why she made this decision. Otherwise, they could lose the throne. The queen wanted her son to have children as quickly as possible. Aristocrats are hostile to the royal family. Therefore, you need to prepare in advance for the fact that her son may make a mistake. And this threatens the loss of power for which they have fought for so long. The boy accidentally overheard this conversation when, walking through the palace, he was looking for his mother. He couldn't understand what kind of mistake he was talking about. He believed that since the throne belonged only to him, everyone should obey him. It turns out that he is just a replacement for his mother. Next, outside the door, they began to discuss who might be suitable as a bride. This had to be a man the queen trusted, which means it must be Anastasia's daughter. The girl was the queen's goddaughter. Hertia asked the woman to bring her daughter. If Rihanna and Igor had spent a lot of time together since childhood, it could easily have progressed to marriage. The queen sent Anastasia a letter of invitation. Hearing this, Igor decided to leave the palace. He couldn't understand why the queen wanted him to get married quickly and have children. The hero felt that he was perceived as an animal. These thoughts haunted him and brought him to tears. The boy had bitterness and resentment in his soul. He remembered the phrase that the aristocrats were hostile towards him and his mother. It was these words that gave the boy the most pain. He felt like a puppet. And then he decided for himself that if he marries the one whom his mother chose for him, he would never love this girl. Even if it is the daughter of Countess Allison, Rihanna. The young prince again recalled his meeting with the girl and how his mother introduced them. 5 years have passed since then. Igor was in the girl's arms. Suddenly, he was very surprised how he could allow this to happen. But it was so warm and pleasant with her. The beauty woke up and looked at him with loving eyes. And then Igor woke up. He believed that the dream he had just seen was very terrible. The prince believed that he could not allow this to happen in real life. What he feared most was that it would become true. The queen believed that her son was very lucky to have his bride. Hertzia reminded Igor that he liked the girl. The 19-year-old boy understood that everything was decided for him, and the mother repeated that she was worried about her son, and that she wants him to have a girl who suits him best. Rihanna, in her opinion, was the best candidate. The queen could not understand why her son was resisting. This disagreement alienated the son and mother from each other. The young countess arrived. The guy asked if she heard about his conversation with his mother. He said that he had a strained relationship with his mother, and he believed that the girl should know about it. The prince asked her to think about whether she was really suitable for the role of queen. Rihanna was surprised by this question. She did not expect to hear him and wanted to ask Igor what he meant, but he turned his back and left. The queen called the girl to her. She obediently approached and greeted her godmother with a bow. The queen said that the girl was already quite an adult. Hertzia believed that a girl should have someone instead of her mother, a person who will help and teach etiquette. Therefore, the queen introduced the heroine to Countess Igail. The countess agreed to serve Lady Rihanna faithfully. Since the girl now lived in the palace, she should know etiquette well. After all, she is the future queen. Hertzia also clarified whether Rihanna would agree to give her an heir in the future. The girl agreed to this. The wedding is due in a month. However, Igor continues to put it off. He told everyone that he was busy with other things. The girl was very upset by this. She couldn't understand how Igor could ignore such an important event. And the queen was glad that Rihanna would become like a daughter to her. If the girl had listened to her, life in the palace would not have burdened anyone. Rihanna bowed deeply to the queen as a sign of respect and left the room. The wedding was supposed to take place in a month, and the bride had to prepare everything herself. She also had to memorize the history of the entire royal family. It was also necessary to know all the aristocrats. Countess Igail was preparing a dress for Rihanna. The girl was thin, but that was still not enough. She did not have a beautiful figure. The countess began teaching Rihanna manners. I had to raise my head higher. She said that if she wanted to become a queen, she had to straighten her back and push her chest forward. I believed that the straighter the back, the clearer the thoughts were. Soon the dress for the wedding was ready. The bride was dressed very beautifully, but her gaze remained sad. She understood that the groom did not want this wedding and was avoiding it in every possible way. The ceremony took place in the temple. Before the face of God, they were called husband and wife. What both of them so much did not want happened, and only the queen rejoiced at this wedding. On the contrary, the bride and groom were upset. They didn't even hold each other's hands. As they left the temple, they were greeted by guests. The girl, now with her husband, went to the royal chambers. The marriage of the king and queen consort was consummated, but they didn't love each other. Tonight is their first night together. In the room, the guy and girl who had recently become husband and wife had mixed feelings. Both of them were filled with fear and embarrassment, not knowing how to behave at this moment. They tried to awkwardly avoid each other's gaze, but it didn't work. Everyone experienced mixed feelings of fear and uncertainty. But nothing could be changed. This is life, and it doesn't always work out the way we want it. They understood that this night would remain in their memory for a long time, and they realized the importance of the future that they had to share. He stroked her hair tenderly, trying to calm her anxiety, while she continued to be afraid. Igor understood that now this girl had probably become his wife. Both felt awkward. She covered her face and turned away. It didn't get off to a good start, but she was the only one with whom he would have to live together. He pulled her close to him. Their hearts beat to the beat. Rihanna became his wife by the queen's choice, and now they will share body and soul until the end of their days. Igor understood that his wife was embarrassed because so many eyes were directed at them, and maybe she will now be on his side. He kissed the girl tenderly. She was very scared. She turned her gaze away from her husband and pushed him away. This was her response to his attention. The young countess refused him. It was a marriage of puppets. Nothing new. The queen was surprised by her goddaughter's refusal on the first night. The girl understood that her husband would not be kind to her despite the witnesses. If she leaves before a relationship is formed between them, she can end the marriage. Then Igor will avoid an unwanted marriage. Rihanna didn't want to live with a man who didn't love her. She would prefer to live in a monastery. Igor could not accept his wife's refusal and decided to take her by force. The wife had to endure it, even if she didn't like it. He reminded her that if she refused, the marriage would be over. The prince began to kiss his wife. The light went out. The guests left. The girl lay with tears in her eyes. Igor was upset that he had to take possession of his wife against her will on their very first night together. He couldn't sleep for a long time because he was upset. The guy decided that today was the last day he would endure his wife's tears. Now she must take responsibility for her choices, even if it hurts her. Rihanna also didn't fall asleep for a long time. Subsequent fulfillment of marital duty was mandatory. If the wife did not do this on the appointed day, then the queen and aristocrats could accuse her of dereliction of duty. Therefore, the couple spent their nights in anxiety and tension. It was strange. Is this really how marriage should be? Once in the royal library, Igor talked with Basil. The guy asked the servant how long he had been married to his wife. He replied that it had been 3 years already. But before that, they dated for 10 years. However, they are still like newlyweds. Basil asked why the guy was interested in this, but he again asked the question, what would happen if the person with whom he had been with for more than 10 years lied to him? The servant was very surprised by this question. He believed that this could not be. His wife would never cheat on him. He considered her a holy person. Next, Igor took the tax report. This is a list of aristocrats who have not paid taxes for the past 10 years. Basil realized that he had been deceived. Most of the people on the list are related to the Queen Dowager. However, they had many people on their side. The guy was determined to grab his opponents by the throat. But there was one problem with Count Allison. And if the Queen Dowager's power was not enough to control those close to her, it could anger her. The guy was surprised why the servant was afraid before starting the business. After all, tax fraud was considered a great sin. The queen was sitting in her room. She learned from her son that some of the aristocrats on this list did not pay a large amount. Hersha understood that this undermined the foundations of the state. Therefore, it was necessary to take advantage of the opportunity and warn the aristocrats. But then the queen realized that Count Allison had also withheld a large sum of money. The queen consort's family cannot be allowed to commit such crimes. The count needs to be sent to jail and deprived of his title. The queen suggested that her son break off his marriage to Rihanna. Igor was very surprised by this. He didn't understand why his mother wanted to overthrow Rihanna. But he realized that the queen was trying to protect her people. The guy assumed that his wife might be somehow involved in this. Since the girl was the queen's goddaughter, she should be under her protection. The hero suggested that punishing the count would be enough. However, Herdia said that she was not going to protect her goddaughter. You need to separate your personal life and your responsibilities. Because of Rihanna, people could doubt the work of the ruler. The queen had to be perfect, and also be ready to sacrifice yourself for the sake of the king at any moment. And the girl was a pawn from the very beginning. This decision needed to be thought through. The guy was confused. He decided that everyone on the list would get off with a fine, although that would also be a defeat. But the servant reminded that this was just the beginning. And then the decisions will be harder, and that was true. Igor was very upset. He turned to the window and saw his wife walking in the park. He didn't know if he could just let her go, and why exactly she became the reason for his failure. But if the girl only knew this. Rihanna walked through the park, periodically looking back. She saw her husband's reflection in the window. Her presence confused the guy even more. A month later, there was a banquet. The queen, her son, and his wife were sitting at the table. They drank excellent wine, which went well with dinner. It was made from selected Toulouse grapes. The Empire of Toulouse is a new religious state. Arundel and Crichton had long been at odds over border disputes. The Toulouse Empire is located in the center of the mainland. Arundel's only trade route was overland and could always be lost as it passed through Toulouse. It was necessary to carefully monitor the situation. Therefore, Igor always avoided conflicts with Toulouse and tried to develop trade sea routes. The queen heard that her son became interested in maritime trade. She asked her son if he knew about Crichton's shipbuilding. He replied that he needed to strengthen his sea routes through active trade, and therefore he is already familiar with construction. The guy understood what his mother was thinking, but the problem lay in Toulouse. He was very passionate about the sea because of this empire. But this was not to undermine Arundel. The servant reminded those present that they had an ally on the sea, Crichton. But I didn't know whether going to sea was now necessary. After all, the queen is the heiress of the Crichton and Arundel family. Therefore, you don't have to think about the sea as long as there is a queen, a symbol of the strong union of the two countries. The Toulouse Empire expanded its power at an alarming rate. Therefore, you need to know when Toulouse wine in a glass becomes poison. Now was the time not for trading, but for reducing risks. And then the young king dropped the glass from his hands. Some thought the wine was too strong, but this could not be. The hot blood of the young ruler could not overcome the wine. The queen was most surprised by this. She hoped that her son would please her and direct his hot young blood to the birth of a successor. But what does the young queen consort think about this? Does she agree with this? Igor realized that among those around him there was not a single person who would be on his side. This made the guy leave lunch. He felt lost. No one could understand his inner world. The loud sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. At the same time, his wife Rihanna was running down the corridor. She called him and asked him to stop. He felt anxiety creeping up on him. Stopping, he turned around. His gaze was cold. She wanted to thank him for the last time Igor saved her father. But the guy just shrugged. His eyes expressed displeasure and disappointment. He couldn't believe he was being thanked for an action he so regretted. The attempt at conversation was in vain. The guy did not want to listen. Igor believed that his wife was on his mother's side, not his. Turning to the door, he wanted to leave, but Rihanna grabbed his hand. The hero turned around sharply, his gaze wary. He refused to listen to her excuses and insults. Igor felt that his mother meant more to his wife than he did, so he wanted to end the conversation. But Rihanna just wanted to explain everything. Igor grabbed his wife's hand and began to drag her into the room. The girl felt fear that was slowly taking over her, realizing that she could not calm the guy down. She just wanted to explain but couldn't say a word. The realization that she had made a mistake somewhere flared up in her soul, and tears flowed down her cheeks. The hero again repeated that this marriage was the wife's choice, but she knew that it was not so. From the very beginning, she had no choice. She was like a pawn in a game, moved by the hands of others. The words spoken earlier came to mind again. You need to know when the wine in your glass becomes poison. I hope you will please me and direct your hot young blood to the birth of a successor. Igor hugged his wife, took her in his arms and carried her into the room. She was unconscious, but perhaps she was just sleeping. The light of a falling star could be seen in the window. Was this really a dream? Rihanna woke up this morning. The room was filled with sunlight. Rihanna looked at the warm rays. Her arms were bruised. The girl did not want to tolerate this attitude towards herself anymore. She couldn't understand why this was happening. Perhaps it was a dream after all. She turned away from the window and wrapped herself in a blanket. Next, we are transported to the queen's office. There was a bouquet of red roses on her table. She loved these flowers very much. The rose has a rich color and a wonderful aroma. Her son was also in the office. For the case of tax evasion, the nobility again made a fuss regarding the heirs. Although they always do this. This situation was very stressful for Igor. My marriage to Rihanna was already 3 years old. However, there were no heirs yet. The queen couldn't understand why her son didn't think about it. But he believed that he was still young, so he didn't have to worry about it. Perhaps he was the only one who thought so. Hertia knew that her son had not been in his wife's chambers since the last banquet. She wondered why the king leaves his wife whenever he pleases. However, Rihanna doesn't want to be ousted. The queen invited her son to meet his wife's sister. After all, later one could say that the unborn child is Rihanna's child. However, Igor did not like either Count Allison or his wife. If a guy would like to protect his wife, then the heir must be of the same blood as her. And the count agreed with this. Igor felt like a cat for breeding. The queen begged her son to accept this proposal because his wife also wanted it. The hero understood that his mother was thinking about how to act for the good, but soon she will be thrown out and she will lose everything. However, the guy had already prepared for this. At this time, the queen consort arrived. It was just in time. The guy was surprised by her arrival and the fact that she offered to invite her sister to the ball. Igor had to dance the first dance with her. Since Laetitia is a debutante, it will be difficult for her to find a suitable partner. Besides, it would be an important event for my sister. The guy couldn't understand how his wife agreed to her mother's proposal so quickly. He clarified whether the wife discussed this issue with her relatives. However, the father had already agreed to this. The hero had no choice but to agree. The day of the ball has arrived. The young king stood next to Laetitia. The first dance was theirs. It was delicious. The girl was glad of this opportunity. After all, she just debuted and is already dancing with the king. Those around him thought that he liked the girl. But is this permissible? Rihanna was also in the audience. She watched what was happening carefully, and her husband and sister danced beautifully in front of everyone. The heroine stood alone. She didn't regret this. Her sister considered this a victory. Rihanna was overcome with sadness and left the hall. The girl went into the garden. She approached the tree. It was to the tree near which she met her husband. The heroine remembered that acquaintance and the pleasant emotions that she then experienced. She looked at the place where the bird once sat. Suddenly, Rihanna heard a voice. Rhea liked plump bunnies, but the best thing about rabbits is their juicy meat. It's very tasty, yum yum. This is exactly what the heroine heard and turned back. The girl saw her cousin. The heroine was very glad to meet him. It's hard to remember the last time they saw each other. Dima had flowers in his hands. The girl happily hugged her brother. The last time they saw each other was in childhood, so it was unusual to see each other as adults. The heroine really missed her brother. The last time she saw him, she said she wouldn't talk to him. This was said because he drew a beard on the girl's favorite doll. The guy gave his sister flowers. He wanted to return before she returned, but did not have time. No one expected that they would not see each other for so long. During this time, many difficult events occurred. The girl wanted to share them with her brother, but he began to calm her down and wipe away her tears. They decided not to talk about sad things. If someone saw that the heroine was crying, they would think that her brother made her cry. But it was so. It was he who made the queen cry. Did the guy make a serious diplomatic mistake? If the girl had known that her brother would come, she would have prepared. The meeting was very unexpected, and the heroine assumed that something had happened. However, Dmitri also did not know that he would need to come so urgently. On his way to another state, he received a message and joined the delegation. At this moment, Igor approached. He said in a cold voice that he did not remember that a delegation from Creighton was sent to them. The girl did not expect to see her husband in the garden. Igor guessed that the guy next to his wife was her cousin. Now they will know each other. Dmitri arrived from a diplomatic mission from Creighton. Worried about his cousin, he decided to visit her. The audience at such a late hour and not even at the ball surprised the king. Why did it happen? This place seemed too secret for a meeting. The girl began to defend her brother in front of her husband. She tried to explain that her brother had only come to find out how she was doing. They saw each other often when they were children, but now there is no time to even arrange a meeting. The girl asked to forgive her useless brother. However, the guy called him a scoundrel. Everyone knew that he was a genius of diplomacy and constantly traveled under his last name. Was it worth leaving the situation just like that? Therefore, Igor reminded that the queen should pay more attention to organizing meetings. Yes, that's right, that's right. The reason for Igor's jealousy was also that he heard Dmitri calling his wife baby. He didn't know that this was what the girl was called as a child. The heroine was incredibly pleased to hear a tender word from her brother. And in general, she had not heard kind words addressed to her for a long time. However, the king could not leave the guy alone. He kissed his wife's hand demonstratively. He was very annoyed by his new acquaintance. Igor said that he would like to spend time alone with his wife. The brother looked at his sister, but she assured him that everything was fine. After that, the husband took her hand and dragged her away. The brother's flowers fell out of the girl's hands. She asked her husband to stop. The brother asked the guy to treat his sister accordingly. Dima wanted to protect his younger sister. Igor thanked for the instructions. However, he said that his wife is a queen, and not just a girl. Meetings like this and the use of babe nicknames should never happen again in the future. The hero also reminded that despite the relationship, Dmitri needs to remember that he is here on a diplomatic visit. Rihanna's brother could not object. He stood saddened by the humiliation. The maid, disguised behind a tree, observed the situation. The king was outraged that a diplomat from another country was receiving it. This gave him the feeling that he was not a ruler at all. The girl defended her brother, saying that he came at the invitation of the queen. This caused the hero's great anger. He picked up the royal seal and threw it onto the floor with a flourish. Next, the king decided to clarify whether there was anything connecting him with his wife other than the queen. This greatly offended the girl. Tears started flowing from her. How dare he even say such a thing? Rihanna started running from the room. The girl did not remember anything further. She only remembered the moment when the king came to her room. He knelt over her and looked at her. He seemed to regret his action. He gently took her hand to kiss it. At that moment, Rihanna woke up. The guy was glad that she came to her senses. The heroine could not understand why he was holding her hand. She thought she was just overtired. The girl apologized for appearing in front of her husband in this form. Igor was glad that his wife woke up. She couldn't understand why her husband was crying. It turns out that he didn't know how hard it was for her. It seemed that the hero did not know his wife at all. The king apologized to the girl and hugged her tightly. He promised to protect her and their child. The doctor came recently. It turns out that Rihanna is pregnant. This news came as a complete surprise to both. The girl fainted due to anemia. It appears during pregnancy. Now the heroine can't worry. The guy gently hugged his wife and tried to calm her down. The girl still did not believe in the reality of what was happening. However, she was happy to hear the news. Next, the action takes place on the estate of Count Allison. Letitia, who came from the ball, was furious. Why doesn't the king communicate with her? He danced several dances with her at the ball. The girl thought she was beautiful, and the king probably fell in love with her. He hugged her waist with his hand, and the guy's gaze pierced right through. Letitia felt his breath next to her. But Rihanna ruined everything. The girl wanted to stop the king when he went to look for his wife, but she could not. The girl was very offended that he left. In fact, she did not like her sister, being jealous of her happiness and position in society. The girl was not going to tolerate such an attitude towards herself. She was up to something. Rumors circulated throughout the kingdom about the king's affair with the queen's sister. Igor was talking to his close servant. They discussed how these rumors were ruining the Queen Dowager's plans. This news could make her very angry. The king did not want this to be discussed during tea. The issue with the heir had already been resolved, so it was better for all the rumors to die down. The king recalled the dance with Letitia. For a long time he could not forget this girl, her admiration for the king and what she said about her older sister. But in the end, Letitia still ended up next to the king. They ended up together. This was very inconvenient for the guy. The queen's pregnancy was ruining his mother's plans, but he was still not happy. Days and months passed. One day the queen decided to write a letter to her brother. When Dima receives the letter, he will be able to find out about the girl's pregnancy. Many congratulated the queen on her pregnancy. Hertia was overjoyed to the point of tears over this news. In her eyes, it was simply wonderful. Dima was worried about his sister's marriage, but now she was fine. The aristocrats began to treat her better, which was a great honor for her. Lately, the young queen's body seemed very heavy, so she could only read and sew clothes for the baby. It seemed to the heroine the happiest time since she became a member of the royal family. The girl couldn't wait for the baby to be born and called Dima his uncle. She did not describe anything else in the letter. She just said that she got along with her husband and that everything was great with her. She believed that the future would be even better and asked not to worry about herself. But it's true that her husband began to treat her much better, became more gentle and caring. It was clear that the guy was also waiting for the birth of his son. Many were waiting for the time when they would be able to find out whether it would be a boy or a girl. The queen wanted a boy, but the king did not care whether it was a boy or a girl, because it was his child. Although these words surprised the girl, the guy said that later she would understand their meaning. And now he's even busier. But he promised to come to his wife more often so that she would not worry. He hugged his wife tightly and kissed her forehead. She was very pleased. Then he went to deal with the important issues that occupied his thoughts. Disturbing events took place at Count Allison's estate. When Letizia found out about her sister's pregnancy, she was very angry. She did not like her sister, considering her stupid. The girl thought it was unfair that Rihanna would have a child. It is because of this that the king does not come to her. But how can he do this to her? It's very stupid. Her father was unable to calm her down. But he was hopeful that everything would change when the baby was born. Perhaps then the king will change his attitude towards the red-haired beauty. The count continued to reassure her and suggested she wait. It was the queen dowager who asked him to do this. You just had to wait. In the father's hand was a letter from Hertia. It was this letter that was supposed to inspire hope in the girl. Then the events moved to the royal palace. It was late in the evening when everyone was in their rooms. The countess entered the queen. Hertia asked her to do something, but it had to be done quietly. The order was carried out. Hertia was given the letter she had asked for. Now everything is ready, and you need to write a response to Count Allison. His daughter is very upset, but she was considered much smarter than her sister. The servant offered to allow the girl to visit the palace, but everything needs to be done as quickly as possible. If you were afraid of making a mistake, you could of course find another girl. But it was decided to leave everything as it was, because the job was almost done. All that was left was to pour a little oil on the fire. In the evening, the king and his faithful servant went into the forest. When the guy was riding a horse, he made a well-aimed shot forward from a bow and hit the target. Together with the servant, they went to look at the booty, which turned out to be quite large. This wolf was the largest in the pack, and Igor had long been monitoring the movements of the animals in order to catch the wolf. The servant was surprised how the king managed it, but he replied that since he had made his way into the depths of the forest, he could not do otherwise. However, the servants realized that they had come here not only for the wolf. The forest was called black because of the tall trees that did not allow light to pass through at all. This is the northern forest of Arendelle. If you cross the river that flows through it, you can get to the Toulouse Empire. This forest is a secret passage for spies and robbers. The king said that secret negotiations were underway with his mother, and perhaps something secret was being sent to this region. The servant agreed that if this was true, then the queen dowager was behind it. But its purpose remained unknown. After Rihanna became pregnant, the Allison family became quiet, and this is probably the calm before the storm. Both wanted to know what Hertia was up to. The king suggested that they hurry before it was completely dark, and it would take a lot of strength to move the wolf's carcass. He told his servant that he wanted to be bait. This alarmed the servant, but Igor was determined. All men wanted to be in his place. He mounted his horse and decided that everyone should know what it was like to be a king. Find out that what seems sweet is actually poison. It was rumored that the Earls of Clovis and Allison had a secret meeting and were discussing something. The king decided to use Letitia to find out this, and he ordered the servant to carry the wolf himself. This seemed like a difficult task for Basil, but it was punishment for reporting so late to the Earl's meeting. The king began to walk away, and the servant tried to catch up with him. Basil could not understand how Igor dared to bring the queen's sister to the palace and deal with her there. The servant asked the help of other servants to carry the loot. The king refused to help and ordered to return to the palace. There was an outbreak of epidemic in the capital of Arendelle. She reached the royal family at Crichton. Many died, including the crown prince. Rumors about this quickly spread throughout the city. All members of the royal family who attended the funeral at the temple also died from an unknown disease. Not only the crown prince died, but also those in line to the throne. Igor and his servant were in the royal conference room. They were discussing the tragedy that had occurred in Crichton. There are blood relatives of the Dowager Queen there. We need to send a delegation there as soon as possible to express our condolences. Relatives wanted Igor to come to the palace where the epidemic was raging. It's a pity that the neighboring country went through this, but it was impossible to thoughtlessly send people to the center of the epidemic. This request was very strange for Igor. The guy could not understand why his relatives insisted on his arrival. After all, he could bring the disease to his city. If the Queen Dowager was involved, the only people who would be in trouble would be those who were close to her. The guy couldn't figure out if all the members of the Crichton royal family were really dead. After all, then it turns out that the only heir will be the Dowager Queen. Hertia really wanted her son to take power. She didn't know what to do. The queen felt very sorry for her cousins. She was very worried about their deaths. Nobody could console her. The woman cried like a child. Even her son could not calm her down. How can she not worry? Such horror is happening in her homeland. Innocent souls died. The son tried to help his mother come to her senses. but the queen lost consciousness. The servants went to fetch the royal physician. The queen's heart was weighed down by a difficult time. What does all of this mean? Igor could not understand what to do. The queen was carried to her room. Over time, she came to her senses. Her first words said that it was Herdia who arranged everything. Basil came with white roses to visit the ruler, but now he has found out the truth. All that remained was to find out in more detail. Is this related to what the king is trying to scout? At that moment, a carriage with an unknown guest drove up to the room. The guest's face was covered with a black robe. The unknown person knocked on the room and it was opened. It seems that this guest was expected. It was Letitia. She came to the king. It was he who called the girl. Letitia really hoped that Igor would make her his queen. She did not allow even a shadow of doubt in her thoughts. She put her hand on the guy's neck and began to kiss him tenderly. 2 months have passed since the outbreak of the plague. An emergency meeting was called for Cretan's council. After the coronation of Dmitri Privius, the kingdom regained stability. He became king and the decree was signed. Igor understood that compared to his father, Privius seemed a weak man, but his diplomatic work was highly appreciated, especially in Arundel. That's actually good. Igor's relative became king, so the hero will have additional diplomatic support. The young and single ruler would probably soon have a wife and children, Bailey suggested. However, Igor did not want to hear anything about his relative. The guy asked the servant not to talk nonsense, but to work better. For example, sort out papers. Bailey's was surprised by this remark, since he had recently finished working with papers. The king decided to visit the queen. The servant supported him in this, but suggested that he should not go on a visit empty-handed. Rihanna was waiting for her husband. Sitting in the room and holding a book, she looked out the window. Then the king came in. The girl was glad to see him. The hero thought that he had distracted his wife from reading, but she did not read the book. She was looking in the book for the feather of a magic bird that had once been placed. Showing it to her husband, the heroine asked if he remembered what it was. Of course, the guy remembered this. The feather appeared during their first meeting. Feather of Atraxia. The king asked what wish Rihanna made, but she replied that she did not wish for anything, since at that moment the miracle had already happened. The guy suggested that in this case, the opportunity to make a wish would go to their child. The girl was surprised by this proposal. At this moment, letters of congratulations and gifts from the royal family of Crichton arrived. These were beautiful jewelry, hats and clothes made from the best materials, and of course toys for the future baby. The jewelry was from the rarest treasures of the northern islands, and animals and fresh fruits from the southern islands. No one thought that the gifts would be bad, since Crichton is a sea power. These gifts could fill the entire palace. There were so many of them. The girl was very happy to receive such attention from her brother. However, the king was embarrassed by this. He was angry with the servant who brought the gifts. A special gift was prepared for the queen. They asked him to open it without witnesses. Then the girl would immediately understand everything. The request to open without witnesses was repeated several times. Rihanna began unpacking her gifts with a smile. She was incredibly pleased, and the servant called her husband into the office. He broke the news that Earl Clovis had died. This could mean that after Crichton, epidemics would begin in their country. The king and his servant tried to talk about this more quietly so that the pregnant queen would not hear. Bailey's tried to calm the guy down, saying that it was too early to talk about this. No one around the count had symptoms of the disease. Lady Letitia was with him before his death. She's fine now. The king was surprised why the girl was with the count. The servant said that according to his information, they could have a secret meeting. Very entertaining. The Queen Dowager tried to set up the Queen's sister with a guy, but when this did not work out, Herdia created dirty rumors. The king couldn't believe it. The servant suggested that if the Earl of Clovis became king, Letitia could be queen. The guy again reprimanded Belize, since what he heard was unpleasant to him. Therefore, talk about this outside the palace must be covered with another rumor. If this suddenly becomes true, it will be a real nightmare. The king had just reached his office, but when he opened the door, he stopped abruptly. It turns out that the same Letitia was standing in the office. The guy realized that he was right. He guessed that the Dowager Queen had ordered a personal package to be given to her. A parcel containing poison created in the Toulouse Empire. 1 drop is enough to make a person vomit blood. He will die in an instant. If added to wine or other drink, the poison will not be noticeable. It has neither color nor smell. It slowly penetrates the body and then kills the person as if the person had died from a contagious disease. It was she who added poison to the Count's wine. Because of this, he died. The girl was told to use poison when the time came to find her place in life. The king looked at Lutetia and she approached him, smiling. The girl hugged the guy, saying that she was glad to meet him again. Igor was very upset about what happened. He felt like he was covered in mud. The king could not believe that he would have to carry out his plan to get rid of his mother. At this time, Rihanna, being alone in the room, decided to open a gift from her brother. He told her to do it in private. The girl was very interested in what was inside, and so she opened the box. There was a sailboat inside. Rihanna immediately remembered him. When Dmitri was 9 years old, he played with this sailboat. And the girl then didn't even know what the word sailboat meant. After all, she was only 7. The brother explained that a sailboat is a ship that can easily cross any sea. He dreamed of one day going on a sailboat trip and traveling around the world. The girl promised to be there when her brother fulfilled this dream. However, first they needed to grow up. The girl also remembered how they played with him. These were very warm and pleasant memories. They both grew up and his brother finally fulfilled his dream. But the girl is not there yet. However, she had Atraxia's feather. Rihanna remembered how at a banquet her husband said that the kingdom needed to develop sea trade routes. Looking at the sailboat that fulfilled Dima's dream, she began to think, if only her husband had a sailboat like his, then his dream would also come true. At this time, Igor, being in the office with Lutetia, ordered her not to let anyone into the room except a few guards. Baileys obediently went to carry out his master's orders. Then the guy looked at Lutetia. They needed to discuss something. Igor told Lutetia that she had committed an outrageous act. She spread rumors that she would become his wife. In addition, the girl lied that they slept together several times. But this never happened. Did she really want to become queen that much? The king tied her hands to prevent her from running away. He asked the girl who incited her to do this. The king did not want to act rudely, but it was better to do so than to torture her. The guy ordered to answer his questions. At that moment, Bayless entered the room. Igor showed him the exit. He left and locked the door. The servant also realized that it was necessary to contact the captain of the guard. After all, the culprit of the event has been found. It was Lady Lutetia. The Queen Dowager was currently enjoying tea in her room. A maid came to her and reported that a red-haired girl was now in the king's office. Well, promises are promises. Although Hertia felt sorry for her son, she could not help but reward the girl for her service. The maid asked why the queen asked to deal with the count. It turns out that the queen's father lost a large sum of money to Count Clovis a long time ago. Hertia had no other choice. But isn't it dangerous to associate such a girl with His Majesty? Of course. But it was this girl who saved the queen from her worst enemy. That's why Letizia is much better than sweet Rihanna. And the queen understood that the girl was motivated to help. At this moment, Igor tried to find out everything from the guest, but she stubbornly did not answer his questions. The heroine laughed back at him. He pushed the girl away from him. The king could not understand who she took him for and why she was behaving this way. He looked sternly into the eyes of the red-haired beauty, seeing that tears appeared on her face. Igor decided to repeat the question again and asked for an honest answer. Who is he to her? The girl replied that he was her king. Only her. The hero understood what a terrible person was in front of him. But the time had come to find out the truth. And the girl decided that she would tell everything now. She will tell you why she tried to kill Count Clovis. More precisely, she didn't try but did it. The king began to listen to her carefully, sitting down closer. The girl began to flirt with him and stroke his neck. She said she did it for the opportunity to be queen. Igor was very surprised by the story. The girl reminded that the king loves her. And in this case, there is no point in being together with Rihanna. The guy couldn't understand what this crazy girl was talking about. At that moment, the sound of a door opening was heard. The king once again ordered Basil not to let anyone in. However, in response, I heard the sound of a falling toy. This sailboat was held by Rihanna as she opened the door. She was very outraged by what she saw. After all, at that moment the king and her sister were in close embrace. The guy turned to look at the newcomer. He was very surprised that it was his wife. Rihanna's eyes became very sad. She looked at them and did not understand what was happening. The girl felt pain from betrayal. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't say a word. Her sister entered the conversation. She suggested that Rihanna came in to disturb her and the king, but the queen did not expect to hear anything good from her sister. The king shouted at the red-haired girl, trying to silence her. Rihanna ran down the corridor. The husband tried to catch up with her. However, Letitia tried in every possible way to prevent this. She held his hand and did not let him leave. The king could barely escape. The girl looked after the running guy. After that, she was left alone in the office, and the king tried to clear up this misunderstanding as quickly as possible. After all, everything was just getting better in the family. Running down the corridor, Rihanna could not understand how this could even happen, why they did this to her and why she was running away, why he was with Letitia. The heroine could not find answers to these questions. In her head, all thoughts were mixed into one word: why? The girl remembered that she had already seen such betrayal in her life, when her mother cried and asked the count not to leave her. After that, the girl saw her mother only at the funeral. Then she could communicate with her only at the grave. She also remembered that she had to meet her younger sister. The red-haired spoiled girl often offended her. This made Rihanna cry. She could cry for days. She was hurt by both the presence of this child and her actions. As a child, the girl was often scolded for quarrels with her sister. The heroine was forced to be more lenient because she is the older sister, so she must give in. Next, Rihanna remembered the betrayal of the queen. Hershia insisted that the girl become the new queen of Arendelle. She even promised to be like a mother to Rihanna. Igor wanted to warn the girl about this when he told her to think about whether she wanted to be a queen. This was just before their marriage. However, everything was decided. The girl had no choice. No one asked what she wanted and what she didn't. She didn't want this from the very beginning. The girl stood and recalled these incidents. She stood and looked out the window, illuminated by the light. Her husband caught up with her, although he had to run for a long time. Tears streamed down Rihanna's cheeks. She didn't know what was heavier, her body or her heart. She no longer felt responsible for the decision. Once Rihanna reached the light, life gave up the pressure. Yes, maybe she didn't want to fight anymore. The bright rays of the sun shone directly into the girl's eyes. Only when she stopped did Rihanna realize how dark her life was and made a decision. She doesn't want to run away anymore. At that moment, Igor was already not far from her, and the heroine fell unconscious. We are transported to a time when the girl is 12 years old again and looks like a child, and so she promised her nanny to go with her to Crichton. This conversation took place in the living room of the Allison estate. At that moment, the mistress's gaze was no longer at all similar to the child's gaze. She thought and spoke like an adult. Jeffrey wondered why the lady had so suddenly decided to leave for Crichton. Yes, it really was an unexpected decision. However, the girl hoped that everyone would understand her. Jeffrey guessed that she would want to do this, because it was the best solution. There are relatives in Crichton who could protect her. The girl was glad that her decision was understood. She also thanked the servant for helping her fight back against her father. However, Jeffrey said he couldn't have done anything differently. But the count was most to blame for what happened. The girl wanted a servant to take care of this house. Sitting in the living room, she decided to give him instructions on what to do next. The girl wanted to transfer all powers to Jeffrey and asked that reports be sent to her once a month. This adult behavior surprised the servant very much, but the young countess could not leave the estate to her father. And this is quite logical. Jeffrey had to agree to these terms to take care of the house. After all, the owner of the estate is not worthy of this. Everyone in the house knew that this servant was very capable. Even Mary confirmed this. The man was pleased to hear praise addressed to him. Next, Rihanna and Mary began to get ready for the trip. Since this was an unexpected decision, we had to act quickly. The girls hurriedly packed their suitcases and took the necessary things. Using memories of her past life, Rihanna left instructions to the butler Jeffrey on how to manage the estate and other property. She wrote it down on paper and left the sheet on the table. The estate's lands were barren and rocky, and the trade route was far away. Therefore, Jeffrey suggested not to count on him, thinking that it would be better this way. The girl understood what he was talking about, but she had ideas that she described on the sheet. The servant obediently obeyed her. Even before Rihanna's rebirth, a deposit of the Arc gemstone was discovered on lands owned by Count Allison. These stones can hold a large amount of light. Such a valuable mineral was used in various fields. Thanks to the money brought in by the Arc stone trade, the incompetent Count Allison was able to move into the center of the political arena. This allowed him to oppose the regency of the living queen. They nevertheless decided to leave these lands just in case, although this decision was not easy. The nanny looked at the girl and realized that she had to grow up very quickly to make such decisions. And now they are on their way to the ship. The girl looked curiously out the carriage window, watching what was happening around her. The lady would certainly be happy with the trip. The carriage approached the port. The nanny helped the girl down, since it was dangerous for the child to do this on her own. The port was very large and beautiful in the girl's eyes. The bell rang, inviting them to board the ship that was sailing to Crichton. Passengers began to check in. To do this, you had to show your ticket. Of course, Rihanna and Mary had their own tickets too. Port workers recognized Rihanna Allison. She's the Count's daughter. The girl confirmed that they were not mistaken. They were waiting for her on the ship, and now, finally, she is here. The captain was called in honor of this. His invitation surprised Rihanna and the nanny a little. The captain came up. Everyone had been waiting for the girl's arrival since they learned that she would be sailing on this ship. Meeting her was very pleasant for the ship's workers. Aristocrats usually rent an entire ship. The workers were surprised when they heard that the girl would sail with the rest of the passengers. However, Rihanna just wanted to get to Crichton faster. The captain praised the girl for her excellent choice. After all, this ship is the fastest and safest among all passenger ships in the country. The captain decided to give them a tour of the ship. Only now did the girl realize that she was leaving, but she was glad for the future excursion. This trip is needed in order to choose a better future for yourself. The young countess was offered the best cabin, and the most luxurious one on the entire ship. If necessary, the captain offered to contact him for help. Then he left. The girl and the nanny looked at their room with delight. She was extremely beautiful. There were many flowers around. There was no end to the girl's admiration. After all, this is a real hotel on the open sea. It is so romantic. Marie was much more happy than Rihanna. After all, the nanny had never sailed on such large ships before. The woman suggested going up on deck, and the girl readily agreed. There was such a mesmerizing view there. Seagulls flew over the sea. The sun's rays warmed everyone present. The sea sparkled and shimmered with the reflection of the sun's rays. The pleasant sound of the waves created an incredible melody. The wind blew straight into people's faces. Therefore, the girls had to hold on to their hats. They stood at the very bow of the ship and enjoyed the most beautiful view. Suddenly, Rihanna saw a familiar figure on the bow of the ship. Apparently, the ship's workers wanted to show it to everyone, since they placed it in such a prominent place. These figures were the same on all ships. Next, the girls drew attention to the wings of this statue. People apparently often touched some decorative elements. Because of this, they became smooth and shiny. There was a belief that if you touch these elements, the journey will be safe. Therefore, Rihanna also decided to touch the wings of the statue. However, she could not reach them. Mary had to help the child with this. Together, the girls were able to reach and touch the wings. People around watched this. The nanny and the girl began to discuss who was depicted on the statue. It could have been a mermaid, but a mermaid must have a tail. Then it could be an angel since he has wings. The ship's workers were amused by this reasoning. After all, on the ship there was a statue of the Artaxia bird, which protects the ship. The ship worker told the girls about this. This surprised them very much. After all, the statue doesn't look like a bird at all. Indeed, there were few similarities. However, the ship itself is called Artaxia. Don't passengers know about this? It turned out that if you touch the wings of the statue, the ship will return safely to Arendelle. What to do? After all, the girls are not going to come back. The ship worker said that in the future the girls will test this for themselves. Ships with the Artaxia figure are very durable. Rihanna was surprised by what she now found out. Will she really have to change her plans now? The girl stood and thought about what to do next. At that moment, she asked the nanny to bring her a shawl from the cabin because she felt cold. The nanny willingly obeyed the command, and the girl was left alone on the deck. At that moment, she took out a bird feather that she had hidden in her sleeve. She took the pen in her hands and thought why she needed such a strong connection with Artaxia. Why if she died so stupidly? Therefore, the girl decided to throw the feather into the sea. She followed the falling feather with her gaze until it touched the water. Then the girl watched as it sank, leaving behind a small flash of light. But it seems that the feathers don't sink. There's clearly something wrong with him. At that moment, the nanny came up with a shawl. The woman covered the girl and asked how cold she was. The girl had red eyes due to the wind. The nanny suggested that she go down to the cabin so as not to get sick. Getting sick is always bad. When they decided to leave, many people were watching the sea and beyond. But it turned out that people were watching not the sea, but the late man. Because of this, the ship had to stop. The girls did not have time to reach the cabin when they heard a noise. They couldn't understand what had happened. Someone made a fuss because he wasn't allowed on the ship. Like this. This man was just a little late, so he couldn't board the ship. The latecomer ordered the ship to be stopped so that he could enter it. But passengers were very outraged by this. You need to arrive on time. But you can't do that. People even wanted to call the guards. But the captain ordered the ship to be immediately returned to port. Where does the latecomer have so much courage? Who was he? Near the ship next to the servant, Igor stood. All passengers on the ship had to get off. Many were upset about the failed trip. But someone realized that this was the action of a magic pen. It helped Igor, who was rushing towards the ship with all speed, to stop it, in time. He didn't want Rihanna to leave. 6 years pass. The action takes place in the capital of Arendelle-Edern. Spies were executed in demonstrations on the streets of the city. And now one of these is happening. The authorities must punish the spy from Crichton. The people were very surprised how a spy could be among them. Few could believe it, but this man came from Crichton and tried to poison the royal family. By decree of the king, he was sentenced to hanging. The order was written on a sheet of paper with a seal, and was in the hands of the executioner. And since this is an order, it must be executed. People in the crowd shouted unflattering words at the spy. People were afraid that harm would come to the royal family. Therefore, everyone was waiting for the execution to be carried out. The queen found out about this. She wondered if it was her son who ordered the execution of a man from the Crichton nobility, and how he decided to start a war with his allies. These thoughts haunted Herdia. But the king was already an adult and capable of making serious decisions. War is war. What can you do? After all, his mother expected adult decisions from him. But she clearly did not give such instructions. The guy asked Baileys to come over. The servant approached the king, holding a book of notes in his hands. The queen was very surprised to see this book in the hands of the servant. He didn't know if the queen would resist, as if she didn't know anything. After all, her son actually executed a spy. He was supposed to go to Crichton by order of the queen. All to poison the royal family. After all, Herdia still had poison left. It was hidden in a secret safe. He did not know how the young king could know about this. After all, the mother does everything for the well-being of her son. Igor stopped his mother from further words because he did not want to listen to her cowardly excuses. This proved that the queen turned a blind eye to the aristocrats' tax evasion. The kingdom received bribes and used them to spend on military needs. It was not clear why the king did not know about military expenses. Hertzia tried to explain that her son allegedly misunderstood everything. However, her behavior suggested that the queen was simply trying to protect herself. Since her son is already on the throne, did she have any reason to take bribes? The king decreed that from that moment on, all the power and finances of the queen dowager would pass to him, the king of Arendelle. Igor ordered the dowager queen to be imprisoned in the northern palace. This is done so that she cannot contact other aristocrats and influence politics. Igor, king of Arendelle, was 17 years old when he removed the dowager queen from power and created his own government. After some time, a ship from Crichton appeared in the waters of Arendelle. This meant the start of the war. Next, we are transported to the estate of Dmitri Privius. He had a meal with his sister. Recently, they played golf with other servants. Dmitri praised his sister for allegedly playing better than anyone in his opinion. However, the girl thought that he was laughing at her. Therefore, she suggested leaving conversations and eating in silence. The brother decided to support his sister, saying that because of this sport she would soon become healthier, and he can even catch a bear. Jokingly, he invited her to join him on a bear hunt. However, the girl was forced to refuse because she did not want to look at the blood. Dima remembered the incident when, as a child, his sister lost consciousness when she saw a dead bear. This was her first hunt in her life. Many were scared when the girl lost consciousness, but later it turned out that she had a fear of blood. When she saw how the bear was being carried, she thought that it was alive and made its way into the house. But now she is healthier. The girl promised not to faint so as not to bother others, and it was good that her health had improved. However, it was important to remain cautious. The girl was very ill when she arrived from Arendelle, but that was 6 years ago. She was only 12 years old then. Dima said that his sister is still a baby for him. After all, they spent time together since childhood. We played together, had lunch together, and Dimitri's father, Rihanna's uncle, still took care of them. The meal was coming to an end. Father asked Dimitri if he was thinking about war with Arendelle. This question made the guy think, is it worth it or not? After all, they could very well win. But it cannot be denied that the enemy also has a chance to win. However, Dimitri's father did not think so. A war broke out between the two countries, which did not exist in Rihanna's past life. If Arendelle's offensive is not repelled, then irreparable things may happen. And what exactly the girl did not know. The king of Arendelle had been effectively developing shipping for several years. Lexington alone supplied vast supplies of wood and other materials for shipbuilding. The strength of the fleet turns out to be not so important, but they have no experience of battles on the waters of Arendelle. If the king prepares carefully, he will win. Both sides had previously formed an alliance to work together against Toulouse's threats, but it turned out that Crichton was trying to influence the internal affairs of Arendelle. As a result, an aristocrat from Crichton who was a spy was executed, and this led to the outbreak of war between the two countries. Apparently, in this life, Igor managed to strengthen his power. He dreamed of creating a strong Arendelle fleet and of the country becoming a maritime power. The girl was surprised why she was still thinking about Igor's well-being. No, she shouldn't have thought about him. Nobody needs this now. It was strange how such a thought could even appear in her head. Dima noticed that something was wrong with Rihanna. He thought she had a headache. Apparently, she overdid it today while playing with the maids. She was also feeling a little sleepy. She was probably very tired, so he suggested that she go and rest. Rihanna said she was fine and asked not to worry about her. You just need to rest a little and everything will work out. The girl wished everyone good night. Uncle understood what she was worried about. She had never been so affectionate towards him, but apparently something had changed. This means that at that moment she was thinking about someone else. But about whom? The girl slowly walked to her room. Her thoughts did not give her peace. As she walked along the dark corridor, she imagined that her husband was also walking alone. She forbade herself to think about him, but because of this, the memories became even stronger. She imagined his steps along the corridor, how he could go to his room. At least that's how it used to be. No, don't think about him. Why do you need this? She told herself. However, the thoughts still went on and on. The girl recalled her wedding. I remembered the appearance of the king, his kisses. But there was no point in dwelling on the past. He's gone. Rihanna recalled that she could have had a child before, but she forbade herself to even miss anyone from her past life. After all, she herself chose this new path. Suddenly she heard someone calling her from behind. She could not know whose voice it could be. Dimitri, Igor, or her sister. An hour earlier, a delegation with Princess Helena Crichton arrived at the estate. All the servants greeted her. Rihanna and her brother were also at the meeting. The beauty of the princess was the same as before. She was like a light in this chaos of war. However, Duke Rurik paid too many compliments to Helena, which is why she reprimanded him. She said that it is not beauty that shines, but the hearts of those who bravely fight for the country. Rihanna was worried that the person standing next to her, who has less than half of her relatives from Crichton, would take a place in her brother's heart, even though he loves his country very much. Helena was surprised that Duke Rurik was so worried about her. She suggested showing the power of his care through play. This made Rihanna very worried. Those present decided, at Helena's invitation, to start the game. The princess threw the ball to the Duke. He was glad to support her in the game, because he thought that the princess had come especially to him. At that moment, the ball hit the Duke directly in the face. Rihanna was scared by what happened. She would like to stop the princess, but did not know how to do it. After all, it was clear that the princess liked to mock others. However, why is she doing this to the Duke? Now he will have a bruise on his face. Those present began to try to stop the princess and called the governess. Helena was surprised why her behavior caused such displeasure, but she started it herself. The governess, when she arrived, was surprised why no one had helped the gentleman before. She called Helena to follow her, and Rihanna. After helping the Duke, the governess went into the house with the girls. The aristocrats were delighted with the girl of mixed nationality. She understood that the guest would cause problems of her own. The girls entered Helena's chamber. She could have rested since she was off the road, but the governess decided to give instructions to the girls. They lasted about 2 hours. When she finished speaking, Rihanna was happy. The girl understood that if the situation had been more serious, the conversation would have continued further. It turned out that Helena started this game to take revenge on Rurik, so there was no need to ask her to stop. In addition, Helena was embarrassed by the mixed nationality of her interlocutor, but they don't choose relatives. However, Rihanna was not upset by this. Despite what others said, she could still sense her blood from Cretan. Helena believed that the girl hated Arundel more than anyone, and then the young countess thought that it was in vain that she had not paid attention to the Duke's words. Everything will stop when the war ends. To date, not a single naval battle has been lost. So next time they would win too. Helena Crichton was the third princess of the Crichton family. She was an incredible beauty. Her long blonde locks attracted the gaze of passers-by, and the girl's green eyes did not leave anyone indifferent. The youngest princess was adored by the entire royal family. She was never deprived of the attention and love of those around her. As a child, many young aristocrats wanted to become her friends. But in the end, they began to avoid the girl because of her excessive demands. Throughout her childhood, she said that she did not want to communicate with stupid girls. Few people could get along with her. Therefore, she had few real friends in childhood. Rihanna was an aristocrat and the same age as the princess, so she became her only friend. As a child, Rihanna called Helena a shiny chicken. The heroine was taller than Helena, and she also had a beautiful face. Her friend often tested her, for example, by forcing her to comb her hair. The spoiled girl said that if she wants to become her friend, she should be able to do it. She made her comb her hair in front of her to see how good she was. After 3 minutes, the child got tired of this and switched to something else, for example, asking him to bring her cocoa. The appearance of a friend in the form of a princess helped Rihanna a lot. She felt lonely at that time after escaping from Arundel. Therefore, she tolerated all the antics of her new friend. This time, Helena's whim was to go home with Rihanna. I had to harness the carriage. Helena wanted her friend to just stay with her in the palace. She couldn't understand why the girl would go back every time. Is there really something hidden at home? And Rihanna was simply tired of palace life. Also, she was not given the idea that the future war was very strange. Igor used to be hot-tempered, but not that much. Maybe he is like this because now she is not around. And the ship sailed closer and closer to the enemy's port. The situation became more tense. Did both sides really want to take part in the battle? What's wrong with a king wanting to protect his country? The problem was that it was quite dangerous to stay in the port. But the king suggested not to make a mountain out of a mountain. This surprised Baileys because the problem was really big. The enemy fleet was approaching them. He was already quite close, and the king did not seem to react at all. This is the front, and staying here is dangerous. However, Igor said that he now needs to be in exactly this place. The enemy ships simply wanted to scare them, the young king thought. Fortunately, Crichton's ships arrived here first. When the time comes, the king will be able to welcome them with warm hugs. The servant was increasingly surprised by the words he heard. Now the guy gave the command to raise the sails. Baileys was surprised. Was Igor really ready for this? The army moved forward. All is ready. Open fire on Crichton's ships. A difficult battle began. One after another, the enemy ships were defeated. The ships caught fire with each new shot. Many people wondered if this was actually happening. Dimitri's father learned about this from his servant. This news was brought by a person who was at the scene of the incident. The count understood that he should have responded to this even when the king kicked out his mother. Now it was necessary to inform higher circles about the emergency situation. The hero sat in his office and thought about what to do next. We decided to immediately convene a council. Rihanna was at the previous estate at the time. She just arrived recently. The faithful nanny warmly greeted her mistress. She had already begun to worry about the girl's long absence. She decided to ask what happened in the palace, and the girl began to find words to describe what happened. Mary realized that Helena was playing a strange game again. What is she thinking about when she does this? Rihanna was not angry with her friend, as she saw it as taking care of herself. However, Helena has pulled similar pranks before. Often the reason was that someone did not want to marry her. And because of the girl, rumors began to circulate that Rihanna is really very picky. Because of the war, it became more difficult to find a suitable groom. But the girl no longer thought about marriage. Time passed, and it was much easier for her to remember what she experienced. The nanny thought that the girl did not want to get married because of her father, but she doubted whether she was right. After all, 5 years after her departure to Crichton, Jerry reported Allison's death. He sent a letter to the girl. "Mistress Rihanna, how are you? I'm sorry to tell you sad news. Lady Letitia discovered the Earl dead in his chambers. A vial of poison was found next to him. It is assumed that he committed suicide." Rihanna remembers suicide. In his previous life, he died in the same way. She wondered if his death might have had something to do with Letitia, but she thought that she shouldn't think about it. "I had to get it out of my head." Now everything was different. There were rumors that the former count decided to take such a step because he could not pay his debts. Those debts came from gambling. The father lost his title and was unable to open mines with the precious metal. He had no other income other than a meager pension. It was surprising that people still did not change. The girl decided that it was better not to deprive him of his family name. Therefore, as the late wife of the deceased count requested, he was buried next to her. Lady Letitia did not agree on this point, but she yielded, receiving a certain amount as consolation. However, the problem was that Lady Letitia had since disappeared. This is all that the servant reported in the letter. He once again offered his condolences, said that the funeral went well, and he hopes that the girl will not worry about this in the future. There was a signature at the end, and then the father died. Letitia disappeared. What brought suffering to the girl and killed her is no longer there. She felt peace in her soul. Rihanna hoped that the events from her past life would not repeat, but no one knew where Letitia was. The father influenced the girl's thoughts about marriage, but this is far from the main reason. Therefore, the young countess asked the nanny not to worry. It's not because of her father. She doesn't think about marriage. He just doesn't want to make marriage the goal of his life. She felt bad as a child, but now she has an uncle in Dima. And the girl was also very glad to have such a good and caring nanny. Therefore, there is nothing to worry about. At that moment, her brother came into the room. He again addressed her with the word baby and called her to dinner in the dining room. However, Rihanna has previously asked not to call her baby. She no longer liked this word. They went to the table together. On the way, Dmitri said that he had already heard about the antics of the arriving princess. He joked, calling Rihanna her accomplice. Then the guy again made fun of his sister, offering to go hunting or fishing. When they approached the dining room and opened the door, they saw a commotion in the room. There were a lot of people in the dining room discussing something. Anxious thoughts settled in the girl's head, but they still decided to clarify what was happening. Dimitri's father responded to this. Yes, what everyone feared happened. Crichton lost to Arundel. What she heard struck fear into the girl's thoughts. Did this really happen? She couldn't believe it. The girl couldn't understand how Crichton could lose. What did the future hold now? The trial took place in the Palace of Parliament. Many people gathered in the hall. We lost to Arundel. What could the ruler say in his defense, and who commanded the fleet? However, if they had not fallen for Arundel's provocation, this would not have happened. Who will now take responsibility for what happened? And is it necessary to think about it now? The Crown Prince of Crichton entered the hall. His name was Eden Roscoe Crichton. He tried to calm those who made noise in the hall. After the loud word, everyone fell silent. The prince ordered to think about retaliatory measures and not talk about responsibility. From now on, anyone who talks irrelevantly will say goodbye to his tongue. Eden gave this order. He realized the futility of starting a meeting. Daniil, the secretary, was ordered to read a report on the current situation. He reported that the naval outfit involved 156 ships and 8,000 soldiers. About 10 ships were destroyed by the enemy. 100 soldiers were wounded or killed. This figure was quite small compared to the entire army of the country. In principle, it's good that they lost with such small losses. After all, this damage can be quickly repaired. However, a minute later, it was said that while returning to port for repairs, the ships were caught in a storm and the entire fleet was lost. Arundel's ships are now approaching Crichton. When those present heard this, many were overcome with fear. What will happen to the country now? What to do if there is no army? What is the king of Arundel even thinking about? How dare he allow such a situation to happen? Meanwhile, Igor was on a ship in Seviot Harbor in Crichton. His faithful servant was with him. The young king wanted to swim there as quickly as possible. He hasn't seen a problem with this yet. Very little time has passed since the naval battle. How is the king going to attack the mainland? After all, their army now also needs reorganization. The servant suggested that now it was impossible to go into battle again. However, the king said that their losses allowed this. Bailey's was worried that this outrage would cause his wife to divorce him before the ink was dry on his prenuptial agreement. After all, this is the time when the servant was planning his honeymoon. His beautiful wife wrote many insults in letters during these 2 months of war. Because of his absence from home, the servant was worried that if his wife filed for divorce, then who would take responsibility? The king said that he would take care of this situation. For example, he will assign Bailey's wife a pension for her deceased husband, even before she signs the divorce papers. This proposal alarmed the servant even more. Or was it just a joke? The king continued to laugh at the servant and asked who he wanted to become food for, a whale or a shark. The servant decided to stop joking and agreed to go with him to the capital as the king wanted. Igor understood that he had a disobedient assistant. However, the interlocutor objected that this was the whining of a subject who had a very stubborn king. They both laughed at this joke. The king further clarified whether the servant had conveyed their demands to Crichton. Of course he handed them over. He made the demands as soon as the opportunity presented itself, so now there is most likely a commotion there. The servant decided to clarify whether the king was really going to do what was written in the letter. Otherwise, why would they send this? Maybe there was no need to start this war. However, no one remembered her reasons. At this time, at the estate of Princess Privius, Rihanna and her friend were wandering around the summer garden. They loved to care for trees and collect their fruits. The girls discussed what was happening together. Rihanna noticed that Helena was worried about something. However, the girl thought that if she was active, it would be easier for her. She was worried about her future. What should they do now? The young countess tried to calm her down. She said everything would be fine. Arendelle and Crichton have a common enemy, the Toulouse Empire. The king of Arendelle is no fool. If he came to Crichton, he would try to resolve this situation as best he could. Helena was very encouraged by her friend's words. Now she didn't have to worry so much. The king of Arendelle came this far because Crichton's ship sailed into the waters of his country. Once this problem is resolved, he will no longer attack Crichton. Even in a past life, Igor wanted to make Arendelle a maritime power, and the girl remembered this. Therefore, he will not directly harm Crichton. After all, Igor is not that stupid. At this time, Rihanna saw that her friend's mood had changed again. She decided to find out what the reason was. The girl replied that she had never heard her friend say that Crichton was still a country. She didn't try to blame the girl. After all, she knew that she was not protecting Arendelle. It's just that if her homeland is Crichton, then what happens? It seemed to Helena that the girl did not consider herself to belong here. Because of this, she became scared. The girl began to worry that one day her friend would leave her. These thoughts really spoiled her mood. She even started crying. And Rihanna decided to hug her friend to calm her down again. She had never told the princess how she felt before, but the girl really felt that one day she would leave here. 6 years ago to the day she arrived at Crichton, she suffered from poison. Memories of my past life became nightmares that caused pain. Her nanny was very worried about the girl's health and took care of her until she recovered. As Rihanna became an adult, her health improved. But the memories remained as anxiety deep in my heart. She was planning to go to a remote place to overcome her anxiety, to a place where the king of Arendelle would never find her. However, she told her friend that she had no plans to leave. She came here a long time ago, leaving the estate in Arendelle. The girl decided not to think or talk about it anymore, deciding that it was much better to just take a walk. After all, in the fresh air, bad thoughts quickly disappeared. At that moment, the governess ran up to them. She looked very worried. It was clear that she was scared. The governess was glad to see the girls, as she had been looking for them for a long time. Helena asked her what was the matter. The governess said that Arendelle had conveyed his demands. The letter stated that they were asking for a marriage with the princess. This incredibly surprised Rihanna. She was surprised that there would be a royal wedding. And if there is a wedding between Igor and Helena, what will happen to it? It was surprising that when making his own decisions, he still did not choose her. She assumed there was something wrong here, and I doubted whether Igor had ever really loved Rihanna.